Welcome to Business Authority Radio, bringing you insights from today's thought leaders, professionals, and influencers. With your hosts, Neil Howe and Craig Williams.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today's guest is Ryan Schwartz. Ryan helps anyone who's charged with a criminal offense in Georgia. He likes to say that he's a keen observer of the human condition and he deals in the art of resolving people's legal issues. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's get right to it here. Tell us a little bit about Schwartz trial law and how you're helping your clients.
Well, my law firm is a full-service criminal defense firm. I represent anyone who's been charged with a felony, misdemeanor, DUI, any kind of traffic offense. I also do some minor civil work, and I am actually growing my practice to include personal injury, specifically car accident cases. And with regards to helping people, what I like to do when people hire me, and people always ask me, well, why should I hire you over the next guy? I tell people point blank that I'm in this to help people solve problems. I offer kind of a unique experience that other lawyers are not going to offer, in that I offer personal customer service. I'm very collaborative with my clients in making sure their legal problems get resolved. Not a lot of lawyers out there are going to personally interact every time with their client. They're usually going to have a paralegal or an associate attorney, but what I'm offering is direct personal interaction with the attorney for that client.
I think that makes a tremendous difference for people just to hear that, because like you say, many law firms out there, you think you're hiring a lawyer, but you never really see them or hear from them. It's always the, paralegal or secretary or somebody else. So getting that personal attention is definitely something that really must make people feel good. So,
yeah, absolutely. Because, I'm sorry.
Well, tell me a little bit about the kinds of clients that you help. You talked a little bit about, I think, DUI or car accidents.
Well, like I said, I specifically, with regards to criminal defense, I help any kind of people with a felony case or a misdemeanor case. And specifically, if you've been charged with whether it's aggravated assault or it's robbery or it's a drug case or it's a theft case, I can be there to help that person.
So those are all pretty serious cases, and, whatever happens to, have this come about, whether it's a, criminal battery or something like that, there's always two sides to every story. So, how do you address somebody that comes in that's been charged? What are the things that, they can do or should do in order to get the help that they need?
Well, for example, specifically, let's say you come into my office and you're charged with battery or simple assault, and it involves your spouse or someone that you live with. In Georgia, you can be charged, let's use battery. You can be charged with battery, Family Violence Act. So if you're, let's say, the husband, and you come into my office and you've been charged and your wife is the victim, one of the things that you can start doing preemptively before even the case really gets going in the court system, you can do an anger management class or a drug alcohol evaluation, or I can get you into what's called a family violence intervention program, which is a 24-week course that is required by most courts here. If you're charged with that offense, you need to complete that course. And typically, if it's your first offense and you don't have a violent history and you don't really have anything on your record, completing some of those requirements I just mentioned will typically get the case either resolved with a null pros or maybe a diversion or something like that, where the case can get thrown off your record and you can legitimately say you don't have that charge on your record. Other things are a little bit more challenging. For example, if you've been charged with an aggravated assault, or a robbery, certain things. Unfortunately, some of those cases involve a little bit more investigation and input, and it's not an easy, quick fix. But certain things like theft cases and battery cases and simple drug possessions, there's certain, as I mentioned, things you can do to preemptively strike to make yourself look good with the court and put yourself in good light, so to speak.
So these are cases primarily where the defendant is at fault. How do you help in that situation? What things do they have available to them if, we know that they're already at fault and they're going to get charged?
Well, like I said, some of the things I just mentioned with the battery case. I get a lot of people who are charged with battery or simple assault. They hire me. I get a lot of those calls, and these are some of the things I tell them to do. There's other little tactics which that a defense lawyer will use, which I won't bore your listener with, that you can do preemptively involving talking to the victim and things like that, and even going in. A lot of times, I have great relationships with a lot of the prosecutors in the Metro Atlanta. So if I have a case, for example, in DeKalb County or even Cobb, I kind of know what they're looking for in those specific counties, and so I can go in and have sometimes a conversation with the assistant district attorney or the prosecutor or the solicitor rather, and say, hey, listen, here's what we got. Here's what I'm looking at with my client. What can we do? I want to avoid a long delayed process. So there's a lot of things that a good, savvy, zealous advocate can do. Rather, a lot of people will sit there and say, all right, you hired me. Hey, I'll let you know when you have a court date, and they won't do anything. Well, anyone can do that, but I think it takes the savvy attorney who knows how to move the case and kind of get favorable results for their client. It takes someone like that to get the case moving and worked out properly.
And let's talk about some of the specifics around the case, because not everything that is on a police report may be true. So how do you get your side of the story to hold up in court?
Well, a lot of times what happens, unfortunately, in the criminal justice system is unfair, right? Police will come out to a crime scene. They'll hear one side of the story, or maybe they'll hear about the victim and and we'll use domestic violence as an example. They'll hear different sides, and police are regular people. A lot of these people, and they do wonderful work, and quite frankly, our society could not function without law enforcement. Okay. However, people in law enforcement, like any profession, make mistakes. And so if you're reading a police report and your client says, well, A, B, C, D happened, but the police report says it was ABFG. And it's like, okay, the story is a little inconsistent. And so you have to kind of do some investigation and talk to other parties that were involved, maybe witnesses, the victim, talk if you can get the ear of the prosecutor and their investigator and kind of talk about, here's what we got. Sometimes with cases, the person is they're just guilty, and they need an advocate. They need someone to come in and soften the blow and help determine what things can be done to help soften that blow. However, other times there's a gray, what I like to call a gray area. And a lot of times you see those in DUI cases where you can leave a bar or a restaurant and you have one drink, which it's not illegal to have a drink. It's illegal to drive impaired. So you might be driving down the road and you get stopped and you have a brand new police officer attempting to conduct field sobriety testing right there on the scene. They screw up or they don't do a great job. Well, there's a gray area there. Yeah, you had one drink, but are you impaired? Well, it's very subjective because the whole police report of the arrest is based on this brand new officer who's doing the field sobriety testing, and he might have done a poor job. Well, you need someone who knows and understands field sobriety testing to go in and evaluate the tests and understand how they were conducted. And if they screwed up, there might be a wiggle room there to kind of get the case thrown out or reduced or charged differently. So there's a lot of, there's when you're evaluating cases, the very first thing I do in talking to my client and in reviewing the facts as I understand them to be, and the police report, is the very first thing I do is understand which kind of case it is. One, you're guilty. You're just guilty. Two, you're innocent. A lot of times you need to do your own investigation to try to get them to the prosecutor to reduce the charge, or you might need to try that case. And the third type of case is the one I just mentioned. There's a gray area. You did something, but are you really guilty of something that they're accusing you of? So that's how I go about it.
And that's hard, especially with the DUI cases. There's so many different levels. Of course, if you have repeat offenders, then there's definitely a problem there. But, specifically myself, I was pulled over, failed the field sobriety test, except when I had to blow the breathalyzer. I hadn't had anything to drink, but I used hand wash, which has alcohol in it. And, the officer, I smell the alcohol. I'm like, I just washed my hands. But, it's amazing how you can get into trouble and be charged, I suppose. So you really need that person in your corner to help you out. So tell me what the advantages are of having a person like yourself in your corner rather than, going to court and trying to defend yourself.
Well, it's kind of like, I tell people, they ask me that all the time. It's kind of like, well, are you going to go and cut your own hair? Or are you going to perform, your own surgery, with scissors and a knife? You're not going to do that because you're not an expert or you haven't been trained in those skills. So one of the advantages is you have someone coming in who, so specifically myself, who is skilled in the art of arguing and in peeling away the layers to understand what's really going on. The average person, the lay person, doesn't know. They're just going to go to court and they think, well, I guess I'm guilty. I don't really have any choice. Let me talk to my court-appointed public defender lawyer. They're just trying to move the case. And they think, well, I guess this is what I have to do. The average person out there is not necessarily, I wouldn't say is stupid or ignorant, but they're not savvy with how court is conducted and, what things are out there to help them successfully resolve their case. And a lawyer who does this regularly is in and out of Superior Court here in Georgia, state court, traffic court, DUI. They understand how the system works. And so they're able to say, okay, well, hold a minute here. You have a drug case. Okay, let me get you into a residential facility here and get you a drug test and blah, 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 because I know this judge is going to want to see all that. The average person is not going to know to do that. The average person out there is just trying to get by on maybe a minimum wage salary. They don't understand. And so it's important to have someone who is an advocate. And I highlight that because you don't have to be the most brilliant person to be a successful, good lawyer. Some of the smartest, the best criminal defense lawyers I know they're good arguers. They're good at being savvy advocates. Some of the worst criminal defense lawyers I know right here in Atlanta are brilliant with understanding case law, and they can quote statutes, but they have no idea how to deal with people. And any day of the week, I would rather have someone like myself who knows how to argue and be savvy and be innovative in the courtroom rather than being book smart. And I think it's really important to understand that distinction when you retain counsel to represent you.
Definitely. And you only really get that when you give your client that personal time, like you were talking about at the beginning. If you don't have those hours or minutes even spent with the client to find out their story and understand them, and you're getting the information from a paralegal, you might not get the defense that you deserve. So
sure, and I think people generally, it's an innate human quality. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to just have their voice heard. And most people, they don't ask for a lot. They want to be able to get a hold of the person that they hired, that maybe they put a lot of money, maybe family members put money into this. They want to know that the lawyer is on the same page as them. They don't care about talking to the paralegal or the junior associate. They want the person who they hired, whose website they found, or whose referral they got. It's human nature to want to be heard. And you have to understand how to massage that need for the client.
So let's talk about some of the myths out there about, getting the professional help from a criminal defense attorney like yourself. What goes through people's heads before making a decision to contact somebody like you?
Well, certainly. A lot of myths, unfortunately, are people get a lot of ideas from watching TV shows or movies or talking to their friends who have had a case, even if it's not the same case that they had, or the same courtroom or the same courthouse even. A lot of people will call me up, and going back to domestic violence cases, people will say, well, my girlfriend or my wife called the police, but now she doesn't want to prosecute, so she's going to drop all the charges. And I explain to people, well, the incident happened. They called the police. It's not up to you. It's not up to the victim here to drop the case. This isn't, what goes on. And people will often say to me, well, I was watching this TV show and, this girl dropped the charges and that was it. And I'm like, well, this isn't a TV show. This is a little bit different. So unfortunately, a lot of people will get ideas from, like I said, what they see in media or what they perceive to be accurate from a film or a TV show. Or a lot of times people will say, well, if, for example, in a drug case, if there's a bunch of people and a couple of them have convictions and one person in the car doesn't, they'll say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll take the fall for this because I don't have anything on my record. Well, that's not really exactly how it works. So I do a lot to correct misconceptions. And a lot of times when you're dealing with people, you're also dealing with parents or friends or family, people who, this individual doesn't know you. They're trusting you because they've retained you. However, they're getting feedback from people in their community or their family or their church or their synagogue or people who are giving them advice, and that kind of muddies the criminal defense of what I'm trying to do. And I have to kind of school people a little bit in a nice way. Don't talk to anyone about this case except me or mom. And I'm gonna, when I talk to you, you're going to give me permission if you want to talk to your mom as well. And so it can be exercise in managing a lot of expectations and a lot of people's perceptions.
So everybody's seen Law and Order and Criminal Minds and all these other shows that are out there. And what's that ad like? Well, I'm not a criminal defense attorney, but I did stay at the Holiday Inn last night or something like that.
Right.
It's
right. And also a common misconception too, unfortunately, happens. Law enforcement sometimes will get involved, obviously, and they'll act like maybe they're on their side. Listen, if you just talk to me, we can get through this. And then they'll just start talking, not realizing their rights, not realizing that person is not interested in helping necessarily. They're interested in making the charge stick and helping in the prosecution of the case. So people out there, like I said, it goes back to the idea that people want to be heard. It's, and people, even myself, if I'm stopped by police, so I've never been stopped by police other than a traffic offense. People, want to say, no, I didn't do it. Here, let me tell you what's going on, officer. And people just want to talk. Mm-hmm. Officers are trained to just say, okay, you want to talk, and they're taking down everything. They can use all of that in the prosecution of your case. So I tell people all the time, it's really important if you're stopped by police and you want to hire, even if it's not me, ask to have your lawyer present. if you're in that, if you can do that. So it alleviates a lot of issues down the road.
So what are some of the fears maybe that people might have before contacting an attorney?
That the attorney is going to be more expensive, and they don't know they're hiring the right one for them. Things like that. People also don't understand. They're scared of the legal process and the judicial process, and what's an arraignment mean, and what happens to my bond, and what happens to my family. How is this going to affect my job, my life? And a lot of times, that's all part of the experience and the defense of the case. There's a lot of things. It's not just, I tell people, it's not just me going to court and standing up with you. There's a lot of other little things, and I have to explain that. And a lot of people don't know. They don't know. It's kind of like if you're talking to someone who does brain surgery, or someone who performs, a doctor who does any kind of surgery. You might be in awe and you have no idea, but if a doctor's in a room with 3 or 4 other doctors, it's not bizarre to them, or it's not, that they understand what goes on. But the lay person, if it's not your arena or your wheelhouse, you have no idea necessarily what's going to happen. And so and I get it. There's a lot of fear out there. You're facing you're in the judicial system, and you're going to be facing a judge potentially, and you're going to be going to court. And it's not, I'm a little desensitized to it only because I go all the time. And I'm fortunately have never been on that side of it. I've been on the, representation side, but it can be a challenging, overwhelming experience for a lot of people.
Definitely. And obviously when there's somebody at fault, how hard is it to actually get the truth out of them? They might be a little apprehensive about telling the whole truth, even if it is to their defending lawyer.
Well, certainly, and that has come up. Sometimes I'm pretty good at reading people, but even I can't, know when someone's completely telling the truth. For example, I had a client a while back who, and I won't give client names or locations or courthouses, but I had a client who was accused of stealing over $20,000 they had been a manager at a coffee shop restaurant type place. And they said, well, I didn't do it. And I said, well, they have video and audio and records. And like, well, this person said to me, well, coworkers took my manager ID and used it to take out money from the registers. And I said, well, okay, well, I'm going to look at everything and we'll see what we have. Well, I'm telling you, I didn't do it. So I looked at all the evidence, and sure enough, there he is doing what they accused him of. And I went back to this person. I said, listen, I know this courthouse. I know this prosecutor. It's not going to take them long to get this out of you. Do you care to maybe update your story? Well, I didn't take 20,000, but I took 3,000. Okay, so your story has now changed. I was able to kind of do that. And I said to them, listen, you have a couple options here, because if you go to trial and you're found guilty of this, it's going to be a lot worse off for you than if we can, get some kind of other resolution. So a lot of times I can tell. It's not hard to figure out. People are not hard to figure out, especially when they're vulnerable and they're in need. And so, again, that goes along with interpersonal communication with the client, understanding what's going on, what their life is, who they live with, where they work, what they do, how do they run their life. It's not hard to get a sense of what's going on. So there are different ways like that. Like I said, you can kind of eventually get, the truth always comes out is my way of looking at it.
And it's always a conversation now, whether the defendant is trying to hide the truth or whether he's just scared to tell the truth. That personal conversation goes a long way. Now, do you offer a free consultation or a consultation to get this story out of people first before they hire you?
Well, certainly when people call me or I get a referral and they want to, talk to me about what's going on, certainly I offer a free consultation. Now, if I've had people, they wanted to come talk to me and then they want to come back another week later and re-talk to me and for another hour, and they want to do it a third time. And that's kind of where I draw the line, because a lot of times people will go out there and they'll lawyer shop. And, we live in this world where everyone has access to every lawyer, and you can go on the internet and, look at all the rankings and the ratings, which is all a little BS, if you ask me. And people will, they want to get a sense if they can try to figure this out themselves. And so they'll go back and forth and talk to lawyers. And, it's what people sometimes fail to remember is this is still my business. I'm selling you a service. I'm offering you something. But, if you kind of take advantage of it beyond that initial consultation without kind of retaining me, I don't really like to take it that far.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's probably more than you asked, but
it's certainly understandable. So tell me some of the pitfalls that people make, or the common mistakes. They've been charged with something. What mistakes do you see them make over and over again that could be avoided if they just had the right information?
Well, a lot of times if someone when they're arrested, if it's a drug case, or pretty much in all cases, one of the bond conditions will be, don't go back to that location, or don't hang out with these other co-defendants, or you can't do, drink or do drugs, or, you can't interact with this person. And not every time, but I would say 90% of the time I see these individuals violating that. And they'll say, well, I didn't realize this applied. I thought this only applied after the case is charged. Or they'll say, after I've been convicted, or I didn't realize it applied to all alcohol. I thought it was only beer because I had beer in the car. So people it's sometimes mind-boggling that people can be so careless or ignorant. However, I had someone who I represented on a DUI, and this person had addiction issues, and the mother in this case kept making excuses for the son. He had been in and out of treatment facilities, had numerous issues. And I suggested, here's what we need to do. And the mother and the son said, well, I thought he just couldn't have alcohol leading up to the court date. And I said, well, they can call him in at any time they wanted to, and evaluate and test him. And he said, well, I've talked to all my friends, and that's never happened to any of them. And sure enough, he was called in because they knew he might be a problem, and he was tested, and he was rearrested while he was on bond for violating bond conditions. And so there's a lot of things out there, that mistakes and things that people do because they just don't think. It doesn't occur to them. People will be they'll be charged with battery or assault, and the victim is unfortunately their wife, and they have young children. And one of the conditions is, well, they can't interact with their wife, and the wife doesn't want to see them right now. And another condition might be they can't go back to that house. So they'll interpret that as, hey, if I can get my wife to leave for an hour, I can come back into the house and interact with my kids. And your wife's not there, but one of the conditions was you can't go back into the house. And people will violate, and we have to address those issues and challenges, because I always try to make it very clear to the client, well, I'm not, you need to follow these conditions. And people a lot of times will say, well, you're my lawyer, you can get me out of this. And I said, well, one thing I'm never going to do ever, I'm never going to compromise my ethics and break the law and do something illegal. And that is another misconception. People will say they want that line crossed, and I've never, nor will I ever cross that line.
Well, I think another thing as well is, if you hire a lawyer, then they're going to be able to get you off, which is not the case.
Sure. That's absolutely true. And people will call me up all the time, and they'll say, well, I just need this case to go away. And I say, well, here's what I can do. Here's what's going to happen. And there have been 2 or 3 times that I know in the last year where I said, I'm not sure I'm the right attorney for you, but let me give you the name of someone who I think would be the right person for you. And because to manage that expectation, if that's their expectation, and I certainly make that explicitly clear in my contract and in my conversations, I don't make any promises to the outcome. No lawyer, any lawyer that would do that, well, in my opinion, they should be disbarred, and they should be reported to the state bar, because people who promise or guarantee, lawyers who promise or guarantee a certain outcome that's just not practical or ethical. And I make it very clear to clients, I'm not necessarily going to get you off of this, but here are the 3 or 4 options that we can kind of pursue, and we'll see what happens. So,
well, ultimately, it's not your decision in the end. I mean, you plead the case.
Right.
And,
that's true.
and then the other side plead the case as well, and it's the judges making the decision. So you can't guarantee what the judge is going to do.
Well, not necessarily. In criminal cases, if you decide to settle a case, there's things called you have a negotiated plea where both sides have agreed to something and you present it to the judge. Now, the judge sometimes can say, I can't accept that. I can't accept this outcome. Typically, the prosecutor kind of knows what the judge's limits are, and I don't see that happen too often. However, there are other things you can do. Let's say we want to close the case, but here's what we want, and the prosecutor says, well, we want to close the case. Here's what we want. You can do something called a non-negotiated plea in Georgia, and both sides will present their cases, and the judge will decide. So it's not always in the judge's determination. If you go to trial, and that ultimately is the decision of the client, if they want to go to trial, and you lose that trial, the judge will determine kind of the fate of that client. So there's wiggle room, but there's also there's ways to compromise and kind of get a favorable resolution by just working with the prosecutor.
Very interesting. Now, talking about favorable resolutions, tell us about a client that you have that might spring to mind that came in with a problem. Let us know how you were able to help them solve that problem and what the outcome was for them.
Sure. And a lot of times clients will come in and kind of what we were talking about before, people want cases thrown out, or they'll say to me, well, can you win? And the word win in criminal defense is very subjective, because I might be able to get your case worked out in your favor. However, there might be other ramifications. So I don't know if that's exactly a win, but I had someone last year who she was a nurse. She was a single mother, and she had been in a fight with her boyfriend. They had left a club, a bar club, and she had been stopped, and she was charged with DUI and 2 or 3 other things. And ultimately, she wanted the case to go away, and I said, well, we can take a plea, or we can go to trial. She says, I want to go for it. I want to go to trial. I feel like if I'm going to go down, I'll at least go down trying the case. And she didn't have a lot of money, and she was a single mom. And it's one of those situations where I had a lawyer who's kind of a mentor to me tell me, one of the most important things you need to remember when you do criminal defense is someone doesn't have the money and they're a little short, but it's the right thing to do. You help them out. And this was one of those situations where I helped her out. We went to trial, we prepped, and we won. She got not guilty. And that was the right outcome. That was a win for her. She went back to her life and her kid. I had another situation last year where the case was ongoing for, at least a year and a half. My client had been charged with 2 separate back-to-back within a day of each other armed robberies. And the district attorney, major circuit here in Atlanta, in Metro Atlanta, they wanted to give him 20 years, and he wasn't going to be eligible for parole. However, through savvy negotiations and kind of thinking of crafting an alternative resolution, which wasn't even in the minds or framework of what the DA was proposing, because I was able to kind of think of something alternatively, I was able to get that case reduced from double armed robbery to a single robbery. And the guy got 5 years. He'll do 60% of that time. Maybe he'll be out in, my guess is 2.5 to 3 years. So in my mind, I mean, he was as guilty as anything, but that was a better resolution than sitting in jail on non-parolable offense for let's say 20 years. So the family was upset because, in a certain regard, because their family member was going to be taken away from them. This was a young man who really had never done anything wrong. He was 19, 20 years old. However, in the scheme of this young man's life, this was a win for him. He was going to miss maybe 2.5, 3 years of his life instead of 20. I think that's a win. So I've had a lot of successful cases like that. I've done a lot of drug cases, a lot of theft cases, and part of the component that I think is important for a criminal defense attorney is counseling. And I can't be someone's savior. I can't be their mom. I can't be their dad. I'm happy to talk and listen. But like I said, a lot of people, they just want someone to care about their issue. And they realize they made a mistake. And I school people and listen, you can't do this. This is how this is going to affect your life. And I've had a lot of people. I had someone actually this morning call me up who I had talked to in 3 years, and I helped this guy out. And he commented, I just want to thank you. I haven't talked to you in a long time. You really changed my life. And he was referring me another case, but he was so empowered. He had never had anyone really care about him in life. And he did something wrong, but he's really turned his life around. And that kind of makes me feel good that I was maybe even a small part of that success.
Well, people deserve second chances and, as much help as they can get. And hopefully they can correct some of the mistakes that they've made. So anybody who is in that position, Ryan, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you so that they can ask you the questions that they need and get the help that they need?
Well, certainly people can find me all over the internet. I have a website, which is schwartztriallaw.com. That's schwartztriallaw.com, Schwartz Trial Law. Certainly people can find me that way, and my email is there. It's ryan@schwartztriallaw.com, and I have a business phone number. I can be directly reached at 678-460-7568. And I have an office in Midtown Atlanta, and I meet clients all the time at my office. And if someone calls me and they say, well, I'm, this part of town, I can't get down there, I go and meet them. I find a coffee shop or a restaurant or a bookshop or someplace where they'll understand that this lawyer is coming to meet them. He wants to earn their business, and I'm willing to give them kind of that personal interaction where it's convenient for them.
Yeah, it's all about that personal service in any business, and especially when you have to really get into somebody's story. So we definitely appreciate that from you. Well, Ryan Schwartz, thank you very much for being my guest on Business Authority Radio today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
You've been listening to Business Authority Radio with Neil Howe and Greg Williams. To learn more about the resources mentioned in today's show or to listen to past episodes, visit businessauthorityradio.com.